to really put forward a better program of a democracy, rule of law, and really human decency for the Chinese people. Rachel, you did such a tremendous job today in walking us through the famine and how the Chinese Communist Party starved 45 million Chinese to death. Talk to about right now. What do young Chinese think, particularly the diaspora that have gotten out of China, when you see these American companies, American celebrities, Wall Street, this fawning coverage by CNN, the fawning coverage by Time Magazine? What is it like for Chinese who understand the oppression and the totalitarian nature of the Chinese Communist Party? What is the feeling of you and your generation when you look at this?
Okay, so I think the younger, if we want to talk about the young Chinese, I think what is popular movements going on is called lying flat. I'm not sure whether you heard of that or not. Because they don't want to, so lying flat means they don't want to get married. They don't want to give birth to kids. They don't want to have a job that hardworking. It's 996. So from 9 o'clock to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 12 hours a week and 6 days a week. They don't want to do that because they know there are actually just leaks for the CCP, because we refer to the slave of Chinese as leaks. So the sickle, one of the symbol of the communism is a sickle. So that's a perfect tool to cut leaks. So it's the same idea concept of sharing the fur from a sheep. So basically, if you actually work hard, the government is going to take everything away from you. The moment you were born in the world in China, you were a cog in the system. That's how literally CCP refer a human life as a cog. So what you do is from the get-go, your mom give you a birth. If you are out of planning, okay, so we just finished the one-child birth policy in 2015. So prior to that, if you want to have a second child and you live in the city, your mom have to pay 2 to 9 times of their annual salary, depending where they live in China, as a fine, in order to keep their baby. And then what Dr. Moshe said, exactly, absolutely correct, because I actually read one of his podcasts, his speech online. I was, at that time, I was doing my research and reading all the books that I can. So I actually found a lot of videos. I learned there's so many forced abortion. There was a case actually in 2012 that was made it all the way to the, television. It was a woman in China, in Shanxi province. She was actually 7 months pregnant, and she was forced by 5 men and to drag her, to put her finger in the ink, and then to sign the consent form, say that she agreed the forced abortion. And then they inject the injections to kill the baby through the mother's tummy to the baby's front nail. And then 2 days later, he gave a stillbirth. And then that made to the international newspaper. And then one of the news report from the U.S., actually, Cai Ling, she is currently the CEO for the All Girls Allowed, which is a non-government organization. She actually said at that time, in order to get help, and she reached to U.S. and Canada embassies to reach for help. And this case is by no means uncommon. It's actually pretty common. So only 2 years after that, we have another big news. This time, the woman actually pregnant 8 months in Fujian province. But a lot of those news was covered. People don't know. Only if they manage to actually get out the pictures, then they start people posting it on blog inside the firewall. Otherwise, people don't know all those information. And it's very clever of the husband of the wife who was forced to be aborted in 2012. He actually took the baby, which is dead baby, and then put it besides his wife, and then took the picture, uploaded it on the blog. That's how the news break out. But because right now the CCP has upgraded their surveillance capacity and technology, those things will not happen. People simply just don't know what's happening in China, and people are dying every day. For example, so the healthcare, it's a big issue for China, because right now the Chinese government claims 95% of Chinese have covered by the state-funded healthcare program. But that's a total lie. The reality is, in China, a lot of people, especially rural people, and I'm talking about more than half of the people in the country are actually belong to the rural household registration. And if they've diagnosed with a critical illness, and they have two choices. two choices. One is waiting to die without medical care, attention. Or the other choice is they can sell everything they own and to pay for the expensive diagnosed treatments and medications. So only these two choices. And one of the report actually found the mainland China mentioned that 60% of Chinese right now, in the last 28 days of their life, spent 60% of their savings. But I think that number is already underestimated, because I think they only include the city dweller, not the rural population. So where did the wealth go? If you look at the GDP, it tells you on the World Bank data from the CCP self-acclaimed data. In 2018, they spent about 5.3% GDP on healthcare. But if you look closer, these are total spending, which including the 50% of private out-of-pocket spending. And but that's still, let's look at the data. Like any data from the Chinese Statistic Bureau, you really need to question, because these are made up data a lot of times.
Rachel, we've got to bounce. We're going to have you back next week. But next week, what I want to do is talk about solutions. I know you're part of the new federal state. This is a group that's been set up to say, hey, there's an alternative to the Chinese Communist Party. Want to start talking about solutions next week. You've just been absolutely incredible. Thank you very much for sharing this, particularly the horrific stories about the forced abortions. I don't think people have any idea how traumatic that's been for the Chinese people, has been for the women. I can tell you, it's tremendous societal problems because of the 400 million they murdered. 80% of them were little girls. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today in the War Room.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we return, we're going to talk about the meme army, the ape army. We've got one of the participants here to tell us what they're about, what they're learning, and what they're going to do next in the War Room.